Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the seminar series. So I just want to remind you that as of now, we are fully booked for the year, so we encourage you to consider giving a presentation for the spring semester. So we're taking, presenter's name right now, and I would like to encourage you to share with us the great things you've been working on. So after a break last week, I think we had a good turnout on the LDE. Dr. Jones is here, I see him. So for today, we have one of our local speakers here. So Dr. Adu is going to introduce her later. For next week, we are going to have Dr. Henry Fedomero. He's the Chief Scientist Officer and Associate Director of Texas A&M University AgriLife Research and Associate Dean in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences in TAML. He's going to talk about Stronger Together, the theme of our collaboration with our sister university. So with that, I would like to ask Dr. Adu to introduce our speaker today. Dr. Adu.
Thank you, Dr. Ferris. Good morning, everyone. Okay. Well, welcome to today's seminar, a land-grant seminar series. Again, I'm Kweku Adu. I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker for today, Mrs. Jacklyn Sanders. In fact, it's listed in the seminar announcement as lecturer, her title as Lecturer 1. And Gerald and I found out late last night that Jackie has been promoted to Lecturer 2. So let's congratulate Jackie on her promotion from Lecturer 1 to Lecturer 2. Congratulations, Jackie. Today, Jackie is going to be talking about lived experiences of congenital heart defect diagnosis in adulthood. And this topic is her dissertation topic, as part of her doctorate degree at Walden University. She's working on her dissertation, and it's not going to be too long before she defends that dissertation, right? So today's presentation will kind of serve as a practice session for Jackie. So hopefully you would ask all the questions that would help her prepare for her defense very soon. Jackie is a lecturer 2, as I mentioned, in the College of Agriculture and Human Sciences. She serves many roles within the college. First, as an instructor in the Human Nutrition and Food Program, where she teaches several undergraduate courses each semester. She's also an academic advisor. She's a primary advisor for our college ambassadors, as well as the Kappa Omicron Nu Honor Society. She's also a secondary advisor for the Student Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, or SANS. Additionally, Jackie coordinates the Motivate and Educate for Achievement Leadership Enhancement Program, a collaborative program with the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, a program that is aimed to deliver workforce development experiences for students, as well as to provide students with soft skills development opportunities and leadership training, something that is extremely important for the students that we are training today, to take over the workforce in a not too distant future. Additionally, Jackie coordinates our Ag Discovery and the Research Extension Apprentice Summer Programs. These programs target high school students and introduce them to the many fields of agriculture. She also coordinates our Summer Bridge Jump Start program together with Dr. Walsh Jones, a program that aims to prepare incoming freshmen on their paths to success. Jack is very, very active, not just on campus, but also in the community, where she holds virtual community nutrition programs and finds ways to support her local community and bring awareness to public health concerns. Please help me in welcoming Jacklyn Sanders to today's seminar series. Thank you, Jackie.
Good morning, everyone. Can y'all hear me clear? Can y'all hear me now? Okay, great. All right. I'm a little nervous. I don't know why, but I tend to get very, very nervous for things like this. But my name is Jacklyn Sanders. I am a doctoral student at Walden University. I'm seeking my PhD in health education and promotion. And today I'm presenting to you my dissertation topic, which is lived experiences of congenital heart defect diagnosis in adulthood. So to give you a little bit of background, because at this point in my dissertation, I'm really focusing on my final defense, but I wanted to go back and give you a little bit of background of where this all started. So when we think of the word congenital, congenital typically means at birth. That is something that you were born with. But there is a growing population of people who are not diagnosed with a congenital heart defect until they reach adulthood, which these undiagnosed individuals can lead to more health complications and, later on, or once they're diagnosed. If they already have underlying conditions, now they've added another huge defect or problem like a congenital heart defect that can exacerbate their problems, which leads to increased hospital costs. There has been more than $1.4 million allotted to healthcare services for to treat individuals with heart defects. And of course, they're going to require lifelong care with cardiologists. So that presents the problem. Why is this important? Well, this is important because there is no tracking system in the United States to track individuals who are diagnosed with a congenital heart defect as an adult. Million. Probably so, but right now it's at 1.4 million. And that's coming from the latest Adult Congenital Heart Association. Per person. Mm-hmm. Yes, per person. To why this is important, because there's no tracking system. This is not something that was discovered years ago now, because it was first identified in 2010 by a group of researchers, Gilboa and colleagues. Back in 2016, they found that in 2010, there were 1.4 million adults living with a congenital heart defect as an adult. Where's the gap? Well, there's a lack of health education material available for individuals who are diagnosed in adulthood. So when we look out for information, say you're diagnosed as an adult and you're looking for information, there is no information that would indicate a need for you to possibly go and get a heart screening or a checkup because of some of the symptoms and things that you may be experiencing. So there's a lack of health education material specific to adult congenital heart defect diagnosis. So that presents my problem statement. So we have a problem with increased costs, increased population growth for this growing population of people, and a lack of health education material. So that brings me to my purpose. So the purpose of my study is a phenomenological study that will describe the lived experiences of adults diagnosed with a congenital heart defect from the age of 18 to 55. This helped my program because the gathered information will be made available to help develop some health education material. So through the research, I'm looking for signs and symptoms that these participants experience so that we can put together collaborative information that we can present to the public. The social impact from this is that it's going to encourage individuals to take advantage of preventive health care measures and use their covered insurance programs, or to seek their doctor for further routine screenings because they begin to develop some of these same signs and symptoms. The theoretical framework that I used for my research was the health belief model, using the authors Rosenstock, Hochbaum, and Kegels, plus some additionals, but they were the main ones. And I applied the phenomenological approach. With this theory, the authors looked to describe the constructs of perceived susceptibility. How do people see themselves with acquiring conditions like this? How severe do they take it, the perceived seriousness? Also, perceived benefits, barriers, perceived threats, self-efficacy, and cues to action. These are all things that will link to the likelihood of a person actually engaging or engaging in those health-promoting behaviors. Now, some of these are modifiable. We can modify their perceived benefits and barriers because we can talk with them about things that they can do to change their concept of why they're not seeking care. Also, their perceived threat and self-efficacy. Do they feel the willpower? Do they feel the determination that they can handle this condition or on their own, and things like that? So their perceived threat. So from this model, what we find is that it explains why people are or they fail to participate, these high-risk groups, they fail to participate in programs that will provide prevention and not only prevention, but it will target certain diseases. So it'll give them help toward these diseases. So that's why the health belief model was important. So as a quick, brief summary, and I'm still finalizing my summary, the purpose of all of this is to look at these individuals that are diagnosed in adulthood. 18 to 55 was my age range that I decided. And I wanted to apply a qualitative approach, and this was to examine the lived experiences of the individuals and also kind of investigate what coping strategies they use to help with their condition. The phenomenological approach allowed me to actually talk with them and get more in-depth information from them and apply it to the phenomenon. So from this, I'm looking to find answers to what led to their diagnosis, how they cope, and how are they currently coping, and what are the experiences after treatment. So that brings me to my 3 research questions. My research questions are, what are the health-related lived experiences of adults leading to a diagnosis of congenital heart defects in adulthood? Okay. Research question 2, in describing their lived experiences after being diagnosed with a congenital heart defect, what are the coping strategies used by the participants to manage their condition? Research question 3, what are the health-related experiences of adults following a diagnosis of a congenital heart defect in adulthood and treatment? Those are my 3 research questions. Now, my participants and my sample size. So the participants that were included in this study had to be diagnosed with a heart defect as an adult and between the age of 18 and 55. They were recruited via social media platforms, and this was a change in my research because my initial goal was to seek out participants in cardiologist offices and also utilize the Texas Adult Congenital Heart program at Texas Children's here in Texas, in Houston. But due to COVID, all of that changed. So because what went away was the face-to-face contact. So I had to refigure everything that was related to Texas and open it up and make it universal worldwide. So I was able to gather participants from all over the world. And this was a benefit actually to my program when I thought it was a delay. Even though I had to wait on approval for the changes in order to implement them, it became a benefit that I was able to seek other people in other countries and how they also dealt with this condition. So they were recruited all through Facebook groups like the Adult Congenital Heart Association, Congenital Heart Defect Program or Association, so various Facebook groups. My initial sample size was anywhere from 10 to 15 participants, and I ended up with 10. Through the data collection process, once I received IRB approval, I posted a flyer regarding the information or regarding the study to all of the social media platforms. And once the participants began to reach out, I had to determine if they were actually diagnosed at birth or as an adult. And so once they clarified that they were actually diagnosed as an adult, I obtained consent. So I sent via email correspondence the consent form. Once they consented, they were sent another encrypted email that allowed for them to schedule their interview appointment. Once the appointments were scheduled, I conducted the interviews, I established my rapport, and I went into the interview protocol questions. And these were predetermined questions that would be asked by all of the participants. After the interviews were done, I transcribed and analyzed the data. I tried a few different systems, like ethnograph system. I also tried a bracketing software system, but it didn't give me the information that I needed. It didn't break down to the things that I needed for my process. So what I did was went back to what works for me. It was probably a longer process, but I used Excel. So I used the participants' transcripts, and I broke everything down line by line so that I could really capture what things or what was the most relevant information coming from the participants' stories. So I put all of that in an Excel document. I kept journals of the information so that I could cross-reference the information from the interviews. And then I sent all of the information back to the participants for their review. So that allowed for member checking, to make sure that the information that I got from their session was accurate. So once they validated that information, we were good to go. So I continued this process. If I had additional questions that came up, I continued to reach out to them and ask them questions, which were minimum, until I reached saturation. So this happened with all of the participants. In the data analysis plan, the goal was to understand the data, code the data, search for themes, review the themes, organize and name the themes, and produce a summary of findings. So I was able to conduct a thematic analysis of all participants, and that led me to these 4 main themes and 7 sub-themes. So the 4 main themes were living in the unknown. In this category, participants really explained how they felt before diagnosis, what led to their diagnosis. They were feeling out of their body, like they were feeling a way where they couldn't explain how they were feeling, even though they went to the doctor for various things. A clear definition of what was going on with them was not defined by their doctor. So they felt kind of hopeless, kind of out of place, so it was kind of like a living out of my body experience. I know what's going on, but I can't really explain it type of situation. And from that, from that, being optimistic and ready to move forward was a sub-theme that emerged from that particular theme alone. Because after surgery or after diagnosis, they began to realize, okay, well, I know what's happening now. Now I can deal with it. Now I can move forward. Now I can make moves around the house. Now I can consult my family on certain things. And they were better equipped to deal with their condition. Yearning to understand and know. This was participants expressing how when they were told about the diagnosis, they didn't have references or materials to look at to help them with coping with their condition. Most of them reached out to Facebook groups And they joined groups where people that had the same type of diagnosis, and they gave them better understanding of their condition and how they can handle or manage it. And from that, they were willing to talk about the condition and share the information with other people. Struggling with the results of the surgery. This part was very, very hard, listening to the participant's story, because they explained how they struggled with the results of the surgery. They talked about how severe the surgeries were, what happened when they found out about the diagnosis, and if they had to have surgery. Some of the, about 20% or two of the participants didn't realize they even had a condition until they went in for a routine checkup. One particular participant had continuous UTIs. She didn't realize that that was something that led to her being diagnosed with having a heart defect. And because of what was going on with her at that time, she found out she was pregnant, and she had to have an abortion because she had to have the surgery. And her defect was ASD, if I'm not mistaken. It was one of the milder forms, but it was severe enough because it had went prolonged, undiagnosed, that she did have to have surgery to repair one of the valves. And that's only one of the stories. Some of the stories were very, very disheartening and hard to hear or have them re-explain. Another one, she was one of the older participants, and she went in for, I think she had a heart murmur, and she had some other complications going on, but she ended up having to have the surgery. She wanted to put off the surgery, but because she was going on a trip, but she went on a trip and had to come back in for immediate surgery. And then if she had a large fistula, and because of the condition of the fistula and how it was impacting her heart, she had to have another surgery after that. During the midst of her surgery, she developed COVID. And she also, it also happened around the time there was a huge earthquake in her area. So it was like very traumatic for her to actually talk about her condition and what happened during that time of her diagnosis. She ended up having to have another surgery after that. So she had to have 3 surgeries to repair her heart defect. And she found out at 55, and she was, at the time she was telling me, she was 60. So she was one of the participants that were up in age, and she was struggling with the results of the surgery. Now she's trying to continue her life. She's trying to work. She's trying to be there for her family. And these are some of the same things that you hear throughout all of the stories, just struggling with the results of the surgery. The something that emerged from that was a concern with the need to have more surgeries in the future. A lot of the participants felt that they would have to have more surgeries to either fix or continue to fix their condition, or if their valve went out. Because if their valve went out, of course, they're going to have it replaced or have some portion of it fixed or modified. Also, they developed an awareness of the signs and symptoms that were related to their condition. And this was very helpful for me, because this is the information that we need to get out. Also, living in the present and planning for the future. So if they're living in the present with everything that's going on surrounding their surgeries, their doctor's appointments, finances, their children, they've now figured out a way to do all of this simultaneously. And then feelings of comfort and support was the 4th theme. Most of the participants voiced how important it was for them to have a connection with their doctor, and their doctor really was an advocate for them during this time. However, 20% of the participants felt that if their doctor had listened to them sooner, then they could have been diagnosed a lot sooner. So they expressed how important it is for the doctors to actually listen to them, and for them to be able to share everything that they're experiencing and have the doctors trust what they're saying and look into it further. So from that, I developed unwavering support from family and social media groups and trusting of doctors. So those were some things that came from my coding and analysis of the things. So as a summary of the research results from research question 1, what are the health-related lived experiences of adults leading to a diagnosis of congenital heart defects in adulthood? Most of them experience anxiety, heart palpitations, frequent headaches, swelling in the extremities that came and went for years, bouts of abnormal blood pressure before diagnosis with no clear reason why the symptoms never subsided, even after medical evaluations. So it's some of the same things that we may hear about or we may just take medications for, but it could be something that would be an indication of maybe we need to look into this a little further. Research question 2, in describing their lived experiences after being diagnosed with a congenital heart defect, what are the coping strategies used by the participants to manage their condition? 60% expressed feelings of anxiety and relief. So now that they know what's happened, they are better able to deal with it, cope with it, and sometimes that even brought on more anxiety because they were in a situation where they didn't know that they would, if they would fail or if they could do it. So it brought a little bit of anxiety, but also relief in knowing what the condition is. 100% expressed their support from family, friends, their doctors, the social media groups that helped them to cope after their diagnosis. 20% felt as if their voices were not heard from their presiding doctors, and 20% did not know they had a problem until the diagnosis was actually made. Here, I just want to mention one of the participants went in for a routine health exam, and it was discovered. The other one, she went in for a UTI, and it was discovered. And another one was preparing to enter the military. So with the health exam from the military, they noticed that her heart sounded abnormal, and they sent her for further testing. Research question 3, what are the health-related experiences of adults following a diagnosis of a congenital heart defect and a diagnosis in adulthood and treatment? Well, 100% were physically and psychologically affected by the diagnosis of their heart defects and also the treatments that came with it because of finances, because of where they're located and where they have to travel to for the doctor. There were also concerns about the need to replace devices at a later time, as well as concerns of having to continuously have surgeries due to other health complications. Now, how do the findings relate to the literature? So that brings me all the way back to my gap. What was the gap in the literature? And there was not enough health education material to educate not even the participants in the study on the signs and symptoms that could be related to a diagnosed defect. Also, there's a lack of congenital heart defect databases to track diagnosis in adulthood. And of course, this is a growing health concern. How do the findings relate to the health belief model? Well, the use of the health belief model provided an understanding of how the health concerns can be related to prevention, like improving screenings performed at birth and bringing awareness to symptoms that alert individuals of the need to go in for a health checkup. We have seen some changes. We've seen a lot of changes in screenings at birth, but after birth. Once they leave the hospital, more continuous screenings may be needed if the child is presenting with certain signs and symptoms. Also, this model is most appropriate framework to use because it provides an understanding of how individuals assess their health, and it focuses on their intentions to perform certain behaviors to improve their health. Some of the limitations of this study was the participant size. I honestly feel that if it were not for the changes that we had to make for COVID, I could have had a larger participant size, and because it was opened up like worldwide, I could get more people to participate in the study. I felt like the barrier of COVID and everyone dealing in their day-to-day lives probably had an impact on the amount of participation in the study. The use of purposeful sampling, I don't really see this as a limitation now that I think about it, because with the participants that were selected, the screening process was efficient to make sure that I captured the right amount of participants for this study, or the type of participants that I needed for this study. Member checking was beneficial, but I received information from 5 of the 10 participants, and I thought this process could have been a little bit more thorough. And susceptibility of the researcher bias. So why was this topic very important to me? Well, I was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect as an adult. So I was diagnosed at 35 years of age, and it was very alarming for me because I found myself to be very active. I was training for the MS 150, and a year prior, I started having heart palpitations. I could run on level ground with no problems, but if I went up a flight of stairs, I would be out of breath really quickly. Well, when I went into my doctor and I talked to her about the signs and symptoms that I was experiencing, she told me, or she referred me to a cardiologist, but because of some medical hiccups with insurance, I didn't get the test done. So a year later, I'm training for this huge event, and the symptoms come back. So I go back to my doctor, same symptoms. She referred me to a different cardiologist. I actually have an echo and stress test done then, and I was diagnosed with VSD, ventricular septal defect. So this is a hole between my left and right ventricles, but it's in a position where they do not think it's good to operate right now. So they're monitoring it yearly to determine if it's getting bigger or if it's posing a threat. So I have to watch the types of physical activities that I engage in, but after diagnosis, I began to look up these things. Is there information out there? What are some signs and symptoms that I should have watched for so that it would indicate maybe you need to go in for additional screening, or maybe you need to talk to your doctor a little bit more so that until they listen, that something doesn't feel right. So that can create some researcher bias. So to help with that, I began to bracket my the responses of the participants so that I could make sure that there was no researcher bias in the study, throughout the study. And so that's a huge part that could be a limitation to the study. So some of the recommendations for future research. So the data derived from this study may be used to develop educational material, to bring awareness, to address the general public, public health professionals, physicians, schools, and individuals with congenital heart defects through various forms, various platforms. And in essence, I want to target healthcare practices and diagnostic testing, congenital heart defect education, and congenital heart defect research. From these, and I just wanted to refer back to my notes real quick. From these programs, with healthcare practices and diagnostic testing, there is a need to provide health education material and bring awareness to the signs and symptoms that individuals may experience that could indicate a need for further screenings in adulthood. Also, health educators can assist with information that healthcare professionals would be able to share with their patients and their families due to the lived experiences that are explained in this individual study. However, I do feel like another study should take place that will allow for more participants to be screened. For congenital heart defect education, there is a scarcity of research studies, or that would actually be research. So there is a scarcity of research studies conducted on the topic of congenital heart defect diagnosis especially in adulthood. As a result, the research skills and ability to publish the findings of the study are limited. So definitely health education material needs to be developed in healthcare practices and diagnostic testing, especially in the clinical setting. We must have procedures and protocols that can help identify, validate, and associate best practices through effective screenings based on patient concerns regarding their health. A patient's concerns regarding their health and well-being must be heard and validated by their doctor. There was one particular participant who was told that she was making things up. And so she felt like her doctors never listened to her because they felt like she was just crying about something that wasn't really valid. But for her, she was actually a twin. She had a severe heart defect and her twin did not. And some of the symptoms and things that she experienced could be related to other health conditions, so they masked her actual condition and mimicked it with another health condition. But she ended up having to have a major surgery, and she will have to have continuous surgeries for the rest of her life. So understanding that participants' feelings and about their health should be validated is something that should be talked about amongst healthcare practices, protocols, and especially diagnostic testing. So further testing is important to capture the defects and to provide adequate treatment of the conditions. Most of the participants ended up having an echocardiogram, a stress test, but even more severe tests had to be performed by some of them. So the social change implications. For positive social change, the recommendation of this study to leaders, to healthcare professionals, educators, and researchers is to recognize the need to create health education material to bring awareness to this growing population. In conclusion, the study was an attempt to reveal and interpret the nature and experiences the participants underwent before their diagnosis and the coping strategies they utilized to manage their condition. So if you feel something is wrong, keep seeking help until someone listens. It's my final thought. The end.
Thank you to our speaker, Ms. Sanders, for this great presentation. So the floor is open for questions and answers from Ms. Sanders. So we start here with a question.
Thank you. I am Samuel Sampson. Currently I am the specialist for assessment and evaluation at Corporate Extension. And in my previous life, I worked with, doctoral students in preparing them for things that you are just doing. I must commend you on your phenomenological study. Not only did you capture the people's lived experience during that diagnosis, you also captured what they did before. And that's normally not done. If you don't mind, could you go back to your data collection slide? I had just one observation. Yes, right, the data collection process. If you notice, to the center column to the top, it says transcribe and analyze the data. So that's more than just data collection. So you may want to rename that slide.
Okay, rename this one?
Yeah, because
Okay.
the slides are data collection, but in addition to
Okay.
collecting, you are analyzing data. So we
Okay.
just want to create the slides. Again, thank you very much and very good presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have another question here from Dr. Laura Carson.
Hey, Jackie, thank you for that information. You know, there is a group at Houston Methodist that's actually doing a study, something similar to this. I wanted to know if I know you talked about getting data from Texas children. Have you thought about getting data from a place like DeBakey? They have that cardiology center there. And there are a number of cardiologists around the Houston area. There are a lot of cardiologists around in the Houston area that's actually looking at these kinds of diseases.
I did look into different facilities, and I wanted to start with Texas Children's because it is one of the top centers for adult congenital heart disease. And that's one of the things I also wanted to mention while I have this moment is that when you look at the literature, all of the literature states congenital heart disease, not congenital heart defect. And that presented some problems in gathering data specific to the adult population. And I want to make that definition kind of clear in the literature. And because if you think of a heart defect, that means there's an abnormality with the structure of the heart. And then a disease is confounded by other things that could create the disease portion. So I wanted to clarify that in the literature. But when assessing information at Texas Children, I did look for other cardiologist offices to do the research and presented the information to Dr. Franklin, who was the head of the department at that time. But when COVID happened, everything changed because we couldn't do face-to-face. So I had to shift my focus to a different format where I would be able to still capture the information.
And one other comment. Years and years ago, when you and I became athletes, decided we were going to be athletes, right? They made you take a physical, and if they observed an irregular heartbeat, they called it a murmur. And because you didn't have money to really check to go and see what it really was, it was something more severe. And that is why I think that we see most young athletes, if you watch the news, they pass out and they pass away. So I think it's a very relevant topic that we should pay attention to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Carson. And Dr. Kwaku has a question there.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie, for your presentation and also for sharing your own personal experience with us. I think this brings awareness to, this condition and for people to be very mindful and to always seek answers, You mentioned the fact that as a result of COVID, that limited the sample size. Did you intentionally select that 18 to 55-year age range, or was it because of that limitation that led you to look at that age range?
Thank you for that. I honestly thought about that midway, especially when I received the consent to participate from the older person. I initially selected that age range because I felt that it would be the best age range to capture when the diagnoses were made. And I was kind of channeling that from when I was diagnosed. So I wanted to push it out a little further, saying maybe 55. Usually older than that, I would say that maybe other underlying health conditions could mask the condition. But during that process and speaking with that individuals, I should have just left it 18 and older. Okay. Is what I thought about afterwards.
Okay, and then my next question is, could you give us a sense of the part of the world where your participants came from? I mean, it's probably not all from the U.S., right? You said from other countries.
So let's see. I did have an individual from India. I had an individual from Slovakia. I had maybe one individual from Texas, and
Is it another state?
let me see. I have that information in my demographics.
Well, I think we get the message. Thank you. Dean D'Souza, you have a question there.
Yeah, Jackie, very, very inspiring presentation. Good job. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that maybe your committee will ask you. Because this is like a defense, and I'm kind of excited about attending a mock defense, as it were, because it's been a long time. But one of the first questions, as you know, is for a dissertation, it has to be original research. So, to anticipate that question, what part of this is original? I think Laura talked about this cardiologist who studied this issue. It's been around a long time. So what about your research is original? And you don't have to answer that now, or you can, up to you. But the second thing is a sample size of 10 is very small. And we got Dr. Jung and Dr. Sampson in the audience. I thought Dr. Sampson would ask you about that sample size, because I think there's a central limit theorem, if I remember right, which says you need a minimum sample size of 30 to draw any inferences. So perhaps this is more of a case study approach, because your sample size is not large enough. So that's another aspect. Couple more things that strike me. In your problem statement, you talked about $1.4 million, which, in today's day and age, it's a very small amount. But if you multiplied 1.4 million per patient times 1.4 million patients, that's a huge number. So that is kind of eye-catching in your problem statement. It's, what, if I'm doing the math correctly, some $1 trillion, right? And change. And my last question is more related to your area, which is nutrition, food and nutrition. So does food and nutrition play any role? Does it exacerbate this if you eat unhealthy? Or if you eat healthy, can it improve a congenital heart defect problem? So, sorry, a lot more questions than we have time to answer, but again, asking from the perspective of these questions may arise during your defense.
I appreciate that, Dean D'Souza. Going back to your question about the sample size, I also question the size, and from my committee, due to it being a qualitative study, the sample size did not have to be large. And anywhere from 10 to 15 was appropriate. My goal was to get 15. If I could get more, I was going to push for more. But where I was in the process, being able to get 10, I was like, okay, I'll just stop here at 10. Because one of the things they kept singing to me is, you can't save the world right now. Get through your dissertation. And so after my, once I'm done, I'm looking to actually continue this research process because the information is not there, it's lacking. So that goes back to your question of original work. So there has been studies done on this topic overseas, maybe one or two, but there's nothing specific to the United States, which is where the problem lies. We need to develop a database for the United States, and we have to figure out a way to start gathering that information for US residents. And so this would be the start. I'm not aware of that particular study, but I'll definitely look into it because I want to see if they're talking or channeling the same things that I'm talking about in my research study. So that could be some recommendations for additional research. And then your question, how does nutrition tie into this? One of the things that I always teach in class is understanding where your baseline is. Where is your current health status right now? So once you are able to determine that, and that's by simply doing routine checkups, doing a routine exam, getting your blood work drawn and figure out where you actually stand. And from there, you can tie in your diet and your lifestyle changes and things that are contributing to those maybe health-related conditions, family history conditions, and things that you may be experiencing. So nutrition could tie into it once the health education material is developed.
I think, thank you for the answer. We have audience online, and
Okay.
Kelly Rodman also asked the same question about the sample size. It looks like something that people have been have some question about it, and I'm glad you address it correctly. And I think Dr. Sampson, you would like to chime in on this one. Before I do that, I'd like to also recognize our students who are participating online. You have several students who have been posted online, and I'm glad to see that our students are really participating. Thank you, Dean D'Souza.
Thank you,
Give them a
students.
round of applause for that. And I think they are from your class because I see Hanf 1322. I think I'm glad to see them support for your students for their instructor. So good. Dr. Sampson.
Thank you, students.
Yes, just a quick rebuttal, Dr. D'Souza. And Jackie is correct. When we are doing the qualitative study, a sample size of 10 is appropriate. However, she opened the door when she 10% said this and 60% that. We try not to do that in qualitative work because then we're going to say if it's 10% and we only had 10 people, well, that's one person. So once we're doing the qualitative study, we try not to do the inferential reference, but sample size of 10 is excellent for the qualitative. Thank you.
You're welcome. We have a question over there. One of our participants there.
Yes, I have a question. My mother actually was diagnosed with what I knew of a heart murmur or a hole of her heart. So we've always had to watch her doing different activities, stress levels, things of that nature. So I noticed not only her, a couple of my aunts, her friends, things of that nature. It's always directed towards women. So I also heard you say women a lot in your studies. So did you find any obstacles within men health as well, or is that a part of the study?
Great question. The participants all ended up being women that actually participated in the study. There was 2 guys that actually responded to the study, but they did not confirm their appointments. So I just moved forward with the numbers that I had. But actually, all of them were women. But that's a good point, and I'll go back and make a note to, just to look at any information that is specific to men and congenital heart defects. Thank you for that.
Okay, we have another question here from Dr. Jong, and another question over there after that. So go ahead, Dr. Jong.
Yeah, thanks so much for your presentation. But so I want to add some comment to the Dr. Samuel, because it's that kind of case is not general case for your sample size. Basically, on your situation is conditions so many, okay? General condition is accept just when you narrow down on the specification, specific condition only. Okay, so is that sample size, why is it not appropriate on your research right now? Okay, size is not big enough.
My size is not big enough.
Yeah,
Okay.
even if you are doing the qualitative research. Okay, and also is when you're doing this presentation, is you mentioned is you did is qualitative research, but is what kind of qualitative research did you do to test your frame, right? On the conclusion you mentioned is your frame is appropriate for your research, but you didn't ever test it. That information you didn't share in these presentations.
The connection with the health
How
belief
to
model
test
and
your
the
frame, right? Before this slide, you mentioned what is that your frame,
so that I
right?
can make sure I know
Yeah.
what you're referring. Say it one more time.
Yeah, like no, not this one. Maybe before that.
The themes. Let me go back
Yeah.
this way.
Go back. Before research.
Here.
Yeah, like this.
Okay.
This frame. Yeah, you have to test based on your data, right? Qualitative research. Okay, which kind of qualitative research methodology did you do it? And then is this model makes sense or not? You must test it.
Okay.
But is that kind of information is not provided in these presentations.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you. We have one question here.
Thank you for your nice presentation.
Thank you.
I may have a little bit argument with qualitative versus quantitative data. Most of the public research, public health research, there are 2 sort of schools or groups. Some favors the qualitative, some favors the quantitative. But as far as you did a qualitative with the size range you mentioned, that's right. But my question is, you never mentioned what level of saturation point you used in your presentation.
I never mentioned.
The saturation point.
Oh.
When you
okay.
have a small sample size for qualitative study, you need to get, you should go for checking for the consistency of response from your clients or whatever, or respondent. So you need to reach a certain level of saturation to take it for further analysis or any conclusion. However, I didn't see the level of saturation you mentioned in one of your slides.
Yeah, so when I was referencing here,
Yeah, that's saturation level.
yeah, okay.
Then the second question, maybe not a question, a kind. The defects cannot be always something after any effect or factors which is imposed for them to have that kind of defect, but the defect can be also genetic defect. Have you seen the genetic background or genetic information about your respondents? Those 5 or 10 people you just considered, because the genetic factors are very important for the heart-related defects.
You said the generative factor?
I mean, is it genetics?
Okay. Oh,
Basically.
yes, there were none.
Okay.
There were no genetic
So they are
factors
born
that
with it.
predetermined
Yeah.
that they would be born with a defect.
Okay. Or the gene that is responsible for that
Yes.
did muted or whatever. So we have Dr. Atai there for a question.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. Interesting. Well, I guess it's a little bit too late because it's congenital disease. I think you should have restricted the study for, let's say, teenagers, high school age. If somebody lives with that defect, heart defect, up to 55 years of age, the chances are that with medication, with Medicare, medical assistance, he can live longer. And sicknesses do happen all the time. And the other thing that I wasn't very impressed is that on your committee, you don't have any heart cardiologist. Human response is very, very different. One drug can work very well for Mr. X, but will not work for Mr. Y, and Mr. Y may be even sensitive. This happened to me personally. And so you should have had a cardiologist in your committee. And it's dangerous to draw conclusions because you're exposing yourself also without having deep understanding of heart physiology. Making inferences is kind of very dangerous.
Well, I get what you're referencing, and you mentioned that the age range, right?
Yes.
The age range of diagnosis. Typically, if they are under the age of 18, they would have been identified as having some form of heart defect. And so the goal was to look at the population that are greater than that age group. To see how many people have developed a congenital heart defect as an adult, at what age group, and what were the underlying reasons that led to that diagnosis. If you're under the age of 18, typically you're in school, you're playing sports, and it's probably identified a lot sooner. So the goal was to look at the older population. And in reference to having a cardiologist, on the committee with the program that I'm under, they develop their own committee, and they bring in those sources to the table to talk about those different parameters of the topic. So everyone on my committee is either a registered dietitian, a methodologist that have experience working in this particular field.
Okay.
Just short comment. Maybe it may be helpful to some people.
Okay.
I myself, when I had some problems, they gave me metoprolol, and it's a normal blood pressure medication. But my body was sensitive to that. Each time I took that, I kind of fainted for a minute or two. And all cardiologists were surprised that, my heart was functioning extremely well. They said, your heart works like in a person that had not any surgery. But we are surprised that you faint. And they found out that my body was sensitive to metoprolol. So when I stopped taking that medication, I never fainted. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. One last question there. If you can please give, Oh, it was, thank you. So I think I'd like to emphasize a couple of things that I really liked about your work, and I don't think your committee will be tougher than these guys.
Now, this was good.
Which
This
is a
was
good,
great.
yeah, that's what I'm
Like, my
saying.
nerves are calm now.
You received some very, very good questions, and I think you won't have any problem in your defense. So my intake about this study, I think, and there is plenty of opportunity here to work closely with our extension colleagues because what you are emphasizing is the outreach component, which basically making people aware of this. I think those findings are great, and I guess you can build on those because many people go through this type of issues without noticing. So bring in these issues to a surface and making there are opportunity. Maybe you are, so the outreach component, I really encourage you to work closely on that because there is plenty of opportunity for there to enlighten people and to help people who really needs help. So I think that's a great thing to have. So develop some extension bulletin type of product that our extension colleagues can use. I think those are good products that you can develop out of your work that really for the outreach component. With that, I think if you don't have any comment, I would like to take 1 minute to introduce our new addition to the college, Dr. Nikos Milako. He's our new addition to the family. He's a new postdoctoral fellow working with me.
Okay, I'm glad. First of all, thank you for your presentation, Ms. Jacklyn, and then I appreciate with that. I'm happy joining the peer review and then the team. So this is my first seminar right here in 2 weeks' time. So I'll be presenting one day over there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Dr. Williams has a question or comment before we close.
Fantastic presentation, and I appreciate how you handle everything. Strong sister. Listen, whenever you get your documents ready, we are available to disseminate them to the community because this topic is very prevalent in our community, to the audiences that we work with, and we are ready to take it to them because information is power, and we need to empower more of our people to learn about these type of health issues so that we can have a better knowledge of things and how to live better, how to do things better so that we can all be healthy and have a great world. But thank you so much for an awesome presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and
All right,
see you
thank
next
you,
week.
everyone, for attending and providing excellent feedback for me.